The next century of artificial intelligence won't thunder in all at once. It will arrive the way a city's lights come on at dusk. One window, then another, then whole streets flickering to life until the skyline looks different and somehow inevitable. We can already see the glow at the edges. Every step we take today, more compute, cleaner data, better chips, stricter evaluations, quietly lays the rails for the decades to come. And if we listen closely, we can hear the hum behind the future. Not a single breakthrough, but a constant compounding rhythm. In the near years ahead, AI fades into the background of ordinary life. Assistants get more reliable, the way elevators became reliable. Mundane until the day they carry us somewhere we didn't expect. They draft, summarize, check, simulate, translate, and reach out to the tools we use at work. They don't replace our judgment, they tee it up better. And yet, beneath the smoothness, another story unfolds. The story of what it takes to power all this cognition at scale. By 2030, the world's data centers are on track to roughly double their electricity use to about 945 terawatt-hours a year, something like the present-day consumption of Japan, concentrated into the silent architectures of racks and cooling towers. The grid must stretch to meet it. Water and siting will shape where the next great compute regions rise. Efficiency will matter, and so will deals for cleaner power. Because we're not just training models, we're building long-lived, always-on thinking infrastructure. Zoom in on a server aisle, and the other limit comes into focus: memory and packaging. Adding faster chips only helps if memory can keep pace. That's why high-bandwidth memory moved from niche to lifeblood, and why advanced packaging, the intricate dance that bonds compute and memory into a tight stack, has become a global choke point. Even as chip makers sprint to expand capacity, the appetite of new models expands just as quickly, filling whatever room we make for them. The result is a supply chain under strain and a planning horizon suddenly full of practical questions. How much HBM? How many packaging lines? How fast to the next process node? The glamour of intelligence sits on a foundation of solder and glass. Mastering that foundation is as much the story of AI as any algorithm. Past the aisles of silicon and the ducts of chilled air, another constraint waits. Data. Not all text is equal, and the richest human-written material, the kind that teaches nuance and domain depth, exists in a finite stock. Several analyses suggest that the supply of high-quality public human text could run short as soon as the late 2020s or early 3030s, at least for naive web-scale scraping. That doesn't end progress, but it changes the recipe. Synthetic data becomes more important, along with carefully curated, licensed, and human-verified corpora. The balance is delicate. Train on your own model's outputs without discipline, and you risk closing the loop on your own biases. Build provenance and quality checks into the pipeline, and synthetic data becomes a force multiplier instead of a hall of mirrors. This is one of the quiet technical arts of the next decade, keeping the well clean as we draw from it faster. If energy, memory, and data form the scaffolding, the visible surface is capability. Over the last 15 years, the compute used to train frontier models grew roughly 4 to 5-fold per year, a ferocious pace that won't last forever but hasn't yet run out of steam. Each turn of the crank unlocks surprising generality, reasoning a bit better, planning a few steps deeper, mapping language to action with fewer stumbles. As scaling hits practical limits, money, electrons, bandwidth, we'll see as much progress from cleverness as from sheer size. Sparse and modular networks that route effort where it's needed. Distillation that retains power while trimming waste. Compilers and runtimes that squeeze more out of the same watts. The shape of improvement shifts from bigger to smarter, and the line keeps inching upward. In the sciences, the silhouette of what's coming is already sharp. We've watched AI models not just guess structures, but propose interactions, proteins clasping ligands, strands of DNA curling into complexes, the choreography of life at a resolution beyond human patience. It doesn't replace a lab bench. It makes the bench vastly more strategic, pointing to the narrow slice of experiments that change everything. From molecules to materials, from catalysts to batteries, from vaccine design to protein engineering, these tools compress the time between question and test. That acceleration doesn't mean a shortcut around reality. It means more swings of the bat with better aim. And as those cycles iterate, invention spreads. Cheaper drugs, tougher composites, quieter turbines, new chemistry that trickles into agriculture and energy, then into the texture of daily life. Policies will catch up, not as headlines but as checklists. After years of uncoordinated memos, a broad regulatory spine is knitting together. In Europe, the AI Act entered into force in August 2024 and becomes largely applicable by August 2026, with stage requirements arriving sooner for prohibited practices and general-purpose model obligations, and longer lead times for high-risk systems embedded in regulated products. That timeline becomes a metronome for global companies because compliance loves common denominators. Elsewhere, governments move in parallel. Evaluation regimes, model reporting, content provenance, and incident disclosure. It won't be uniform and won't always be tidy, but the direction is clear. If a system can reach many people or make high-impact decisions, we'll test it, document it, and watch it in the wild. Over time, this becomes as routine as aircraft certifications, sometimes slow, sometimes frustrating, but stabilizing. Through the 2030s, something quieter and more consequential happens inside organizations. Assistants become agents, software that plans, acts, checks itself, and leaves an audit trail. At first, it handles repetitive workflows with human review. Then it strings together tools, the CRM, the ERP, the design suite, the code repo, the compliance portal. The outcome is not magic, it's orchestration. Productivity rises because the machine keeps the thread from end to end. Executives don't just ask for dashboards, they ask for simulations. Operators don't just read playbooks, they run them. In the same years, the physical world catches up. Robots that can load, clean, pick, carry, sort, and assist become more dependable, not because they're perfect, but because the edge cases shrink and the maintenance loops improve. The line workers who adopt these systems become systems engineers without changing their job titles. None of this lands evenly, and the labor market feels it. The best early estimates from credible institutions suggest that roughly 40% of global jobs, and around 60% in advanced economies, are exposed to AI in some way. About half of those exposures look complementary, boosting productivity. The remainder feel more substitutive, where tasks can be automated and demand for certain roles dips unless new work emerges to fill the gap. That mix has consequences for wages, training, and the social contract. If we invest in skills and make adoption broad, the upside spreads. If we don't, the benefits pool in fewer places. Either way, leaders will need to steer, because productivity gains on paper still have to walk through the door and find a home in daily process. By the mid-century horizon, two arcs are both plausible and instructive. In the first, we clear enough bottlenecks, power, memory, data, evaluation, that AI surpasses typical human performance across most cognitive tasks and many manual ones. Work reorganizes around specifying outcomes and checking governance. Science accelerates. Services become cheaper and more personalized. In the second arc, progress slows into an S-curve. Energy becomes the binding constraint. Memory bandwidth refuses to scale at past rates. Data quality plateaus. Regulation grows tighter. AI remains extraordinary. Ubiquitous co-pilots, industry agents, targeted robotics, but it doesn't dominate every contour of the economy. Both arcs are compatible with the evidence we have today, and which arc we take will depend as much on choices, investment, standards, infrastructure, as on breakthroughs. Meanwhile, the grid keeps humming, and with it, the debate about sustainability. Power demand from data centers keeps rising faster than other sectors, and while efficiency improves, total consumption still grows. Expect a wave of long-term power purchase agreements, experiments in heat reuse, siting in cooler climates, and a pragmatic turn toward firm low-carbon power, new nuclear included, because so much inference isn't batchable. It happens when people need answers. Water constraints tighten siting decisions. Non-potable cooling and dry cooling technologies spread. In an odd twist, the sector driving demand becomes a key customer for the technologies that stabilize the grid. The transition becomes an engineering problem in both directions: computing helping energy, energy enabling computing. Security lives in the same tension between capability and control. The more systems can do, the more we ask what happens when the wrong person asks the right question. Early evidence suggests that, compared to simply using the open internet, today's general-purpose models don't yet provide a dramatic uplift for would-be bioterrorists. That is a relief, not a guarantee. As models get better at planning and error correction, we'll need evaluations that keep pace and access controls that are more than window dressing. Cybersecurity sees a similar push-pull. AI amplifies attackers and defenders, and the slope of that race matters. Expect the emergence of early warning systems for misuse and red teaming protocols that feel less like novelty and more like fire codes, tested, boring, and life-saving. The economics of the shift are as large as they are lumpy. The upside runs into the trillions of dollars per year when counted across industries. The capture is uneven and front-loaded to sectors where language and software already do much of the work. Customer operations, sales and marketing, software, and R&D see the biggest immediate boosts. Heavy industry follows as the tools knit into design and control systems. But capturing value depends on redesigning process, not just buying models. Companies that do the slow integration work, rewriting workflows, remapping incentives, teaching teams the new stack, take the prize. Those that sprinkle AI across legacy processes watch the value evaporate into slide decks. Underneath the economics, the supply chain becomes geopolitics in miniature. High bandwidth memory, advanced packaging, lithography at ever tighter nodes. These aren't just technical subfields, they're strategic levers. Export controls, licensing regimes, and capacity expansions drive where the next cohort of labs can train and where the next wave of startups can launch. Even news that would once be niche, packaging throughput, HBM backlogs, 2-nanometer tape-out timing, now ripples into national policy debates. The world is learning that intelligence at scale is a physical industry with real factories, real heat, real constraints. The romance of the cloud gives way to the sobriety of the plant. Out at the edge of capability, we'll keep watching for the signposts that change the slope. Does the trend in training compute keep rising or bend as capital and power costs bite? Do new data pipelines, licensed, synthetic, human-verified, avoid the traps of self-amplified error? Do safety standards coalesce into something like pre-deployment certification for powerful general-purpose models with incident reporting that actually flows across borders? Does the chip ecosystem, compute dies, memory stacks, packaging capacity, hit its ambitious timelines? Are we seeing science tools move beyond proteins into chemistry, materials, and complex systems with AlphaFold-like leaps? Each of these questions is legible in public, and each will tell us where we are on the map. For individuals, the next century of AI will feel less like replacement and more like reconfiguration. We'll offload the tedious first draft but hold the second-order judgment. We'll simulate decisions before we make them, catching mistakes before they have names. Many of us will collaborate with software that knows our habits and our standards, and whose value lies in its patience. The human edge becomes both narrower and more valuable. Framing the right problem, checking the hidden assumptions, deciding when good enough is actually good enough. The most enduring advantage is taste. Knowing what you want and recognizing it when you see it. For cities, the change shows up in texture. Quieter logistics as robots and routing shave roughness from deliveries. Denser knowledge work clustered not just around finance and law, but around model operations and evaluation. Neighborhoods that host new kinds of power and cooling infrastructure, doing the literal heavy lifting for the digital economy. In the long run, even zoning debates may turn on where to put the minds of machines, and how to share their heat with the people who live next door. There will be stumbles. Some models will ship too early and we'll learn again why testing exists. Some promises will inflate beyond reason. Some fears will too. Disinformation waves will rise and recede. We'll harden our institutions and our media literacy the way societies harden after early epidemics. Tools, norms, drills. Laws will lag and then lurch forward. Companies will make mistakes in public. The better ones will keep their nerves and their logs intact. And all the while, the slow work will continue, making the systems more robust, the interfaces calmer, the evaluation sharper, the power cleaner. If there is a single durable lesson to carry through this century of AI, it's that the shape of the curve is ours to influence. We are not spectators to the graph of capability. The decisions we make about power, data, standards, and skills are not footnotes. They are steering inputs. On the days when the field feels like a blur of product launches and benchmarks, it helps to remember that the real drama is in the infrastructure we decide to build and in the institutions we decide to trust. Intelligence is compounding. So too are governance and good engineering. By the time we look up in the middle of the century, the skyline will have changed enough that we'll need memory to recall how it looked before. The elevators will still be boring. The lights will still come on at dusk. But making a drug will take weeks instead of years. Planning a factory will feel like writing a simulation and then pressing go. Education will flex to the student rather than the other way around. The daily frictions that don't teach us anything will slip quietly into the background, leaving more room for the work that matters. That won't happen in a single leap. It'll happen the way it already is, one window at a time, then a street, then a district, until the city of the future looks, from a distance, like the most natural thing in the world,